This happened back in early 2015. I was then a 19-year-old guy living in a rather bad area of Portland, Oregon. Even though there were occasionally some belligerent homeless people or drug addicts around, violent muggings were very rare, and most of the city actually felt very safe, even at night. One of my best friends had just turned 21, so we decided to go bar hopping and then go clubbing to celebrate. I was in a group of about a dozen other people, 3 of which were my roommates. Unfortunately for me, I was the only one in my group who was either under the legal drinking age or did not have a fake ID card. This meant that I was unable to enter the bar with them. To my luck, however, there was a very nice Mediterranean restaurant right across the street from the bar, which I ended up going to. I stayed there for more than an hour, and then I was ready to leave. I've done that walk many times, even at night, so I've never been scared. Until this night, of course. From my apartment, my roommates took an Uber to the bar. This meant I would have to walk back since I didn't have Uber, and my phone battery was running quite low as well. The distance back to my apartment was about 3 miles or so. The time was already close to midnight, and I would be reaching my apartment at around 1 a.m. I decided to walk the distance anyway, since I haven't been at the gym lately, and I thought it might be some good exercise. I began my walk, and as I started, I began to pass by lots of drunks. Even though occasionally some of the drunks would shout things at me, I never really felt unsafe or threatened by them, so that much was okay. However, the last mile to my apartment was through this darkly lit park that can be very scary at night. Not necessarily because any crime happens there, but because there's only one streetlight in that entire stretch of road. I reached this somewhat creepy area at around 12:30 a.m. As I descend down the dark and narrow street, I notice a black Chevy Silverado speed past me and slow down right once he reaches me. The truck almost comes to a stop, but then decides to drive on ahead. I shrugged it off at first. However, this is where things started to get very creepy. After I walked nearly a quarter mile forwards, the Chevy Silverado came down the opposite direction and did the exact same thing. This time when the truck slowed down and almost came to a complete halt right next to me, I began to panic but tried not to openly show it. I pretended to ignore the vehicle, but my instincts were screaming at me that something was not right. The truck starts to proceed, but this time I just could not keep calm. I was now in the middle of a dark and isolated park with no streetlights in sight, and there wasn't a single person around either. After I walked about 500 more feet, I began to look in terror as the same pickup truck came flying towards me. They put a sudden brake only about 100 feet behind me. One man, around twice my age and bald, threw open the passenger door and came out of his truck carrying what looked like a hockey club. I looked behind and locked eyes with him. He gave me the most haunting and sinister look I've seen from a real person. He began to yell at me, "Get the fuck out of my sight, or I'll fuck you up." I'm of Indian origin and have brown skin. The thing he called me after that was a racial slur directed towards Muslims. As I was planning my escape, I remember how there was a wooded area between the park and my apartment. Where I was, I could cut across the park and go through some woods. Then right across the woods was my apartment. This was a smart idea, I thought, because I'd taken that shortcut during the day before, and the truck would not be able to cut through the woods. Just as I ran towards those woods, I heard another person yelling in the distance. "Fuck off, asshole!" yelled another large guy walking the opposite direction of the sidewalk I was. Then I see another large man walking his German Shepherd towards me. After there, the truck driver started running at us with his hockey club, and I made a run for it. I darted towards the woods. Fortunately, the truck driver decided it wouldn't be worth it to chase me and got back into his truck. I reached my apartment 5 minutes later. At the parking lot of my apartment, I also happened to see the guy that was walking his dog. He looked like a roughed-up bodybuilder, so I was a little afraid of him when I'd first seen him too. However, we actually had a very pleasant conversation. I began to head up to my apartment, and I looked at my apartment window. To my disgust and horror, I saw that black Chevy Silverado drive by my apartment and then leave after a bit. My friends came home close to 3 in the morning, just after I'd gone to bed that night. Thankfully, I never saw that creep again, and I moved out of that apartment just a few months later. After this incident, I avoided walking alone in dark spots and isolated areas at night. Preamble. I'm a late 20s female, and this happened fairly recently. Nothing bad happened to me, I'm lucky it didn't, but it easily could have. There's a conservation area that I used to like to walk in regularly. It's right beside a golf course near an ordinary subdivision, just off a busy road. It's very popular with dog walkers and photographers. The conservation area is fairly well maintained and alerts its users that there are hidden cameras absolutely everywhere. My point in bringing attention to all of this is to say that by all accounts, this is a very safe, vanilla, urban wooded area in a very populated place. One big thing about me is that I like a bit of isolation to recharge. I dislike crowded trails and by convention go on off-peak hours or when the weather is quite unpleasant. Not dangerous, but just a little bit unpleasant. You know, lightly raining, just a little bit foggy. I stay safe, but I like to be there where as few people are around as possible. In a city in broad daylight, I don't really feel like I'm taking that many risks by doing this. The first encounter. There was one day I went at around 4 p.m. or so on a frigid, rainy Monday in November. On days like that, there were maybe only 1 or 2 dog walkers. But today, there was not even a car in the parking lot, except for a dirty blue pickup truck with a man sitting in it. I noticed right away that he was looking at me, but that didn't really bother me. I was just happy to see that the trail was completely empty. On this particular day, I went to the area to practice my navigational skills. I was learning how to use a compass at the time, and it's good to practice that skill in an area that you won't really get lost in. I decided to go just a bit off trail to a big pine plantation, which was a big open area with lots of large mature pine trees, if you're not familiar. It's not a hiking area or really even that interesting in any way. Definitely off the trail though. By that I mean you wouldn't get there unless you really wanted to be there in the first place. I picked my first landmark and sighted it using my compass. I was pacing towards it. I found myself about halfway there when I suddenly heard a rustling through the bushes. I turned around to see the man from the dirty blue pickup truck there, entering the pine plantation. He was a mid-50s white man, a little bit pudgy, wearing a baggy beige cardigan and blue slacks. I felt pretty alert immediately. This felt out of place somehow. I took note but pretended to keep walking around with my compass because I didn't want to seem weird. I looked right at him. He pretended to ignore me. I was getting this really bad gut feeling about the situation for some reason at this point, and I felt like he was starting to follow me. I do have anxiety disorder though, so I try not to freak out and get paranoid for zero reason. I mean, I don't want to ruin my only relaxation time after all. It's just a guy walking around. No big deal, right? To see if he's following me though, I pivot 180 degrees and walk directly toward the trail again. He's still following me. I walk through the bushes onto the trail, still following me. At this point, I was freaked out. The pine plantation entrance is only about 50 feet on the trail. So you're telling me this guy would have walked 50 feet, entered the pine plantation, and then immediately decided that was enough for the day? Bad odds. Definitely following me. I quickly exited the trail. When I was leaving the parking lot, I could see he was still staring at me. I decided to take the long way home. The experience really freaked me out, and I only visited the area once more before the second encounter. This time it was in January. I wanted to go bird watching. A week prior, I had seen an owl in the same plantation. I was practicing my navigation again. I wanted to go and visit it once more. I had seen it about an hour before sundown, so I figured that was a good time to try and see it again in the same area. Before I started though, I did a scan of the parking lot and saw there was no blue pickup truck this time. There were 2 other cars with men though. One was a red sedan with heavily tinted windows, and it looked like the other one was completely empty. I go onto the trail again. Today was muddy, wet, and cold. Area should be totally empty. Good. Unfortunately, not quite so. About 20 feet onto the trail, I suddenly begin to hear footsteps behind me. I don't really like when people walk behind me, but it's not exactly a crime. I figured I'd lose them when I went to the pine plantation. I'm sure you know where this is going. When I walk in on the plantation, there's the same rustling of bushes as before. When I turn around, I see the exact same man. I feel a wave of terror and dread overcome me, alone in a muddy forest with this possible stalker. But it was so calm. It felt so mundane. To confirm my fears, I walked over to the area where I saw the owl last week and paused to look for it. Who do I see come right next to me but the same freaking guy from before? I was terrified at this point. Every part of me was screaming to run, so I walked as fast as I could back to the trail again. I passed some other random guy in the same pine plantation and smiled at him just totally on autopilot. He smiled back. It wasn't until I was in the parking lot when I finally got freaked out that there was a second person in that same pine plantation. Could they have been connected somehow? I stopped briefly in the parking lot and took out a small notepad to quickly write down the license plates of the 2 cars. This gave the original man time to catch up to the parking lot. I was booking it out on foot when he yelled towards me, "Hey, can I give you a ride?" I just shook my head and kept walking. As I walked away, he began to follow me in his car. He waited at the intersection to see which direction I was going in. I decided to walk in a busy park to lose him though. He pulled into this hidden nearby driveway and stared at me. He took his phone out to presumably take a photo of me. He noted what direction I was walking in, then did a U-turn and drove away the other way. I took the long way home after that. I filed a police report and the police opened an investigation onto it. I've not gone back to the conservation area since, and the experience has definitely left me with an ongoing nervousness about being alone. Doubly more because I don't know who the second guy was. I passed him so quickly, I only really know that he was also in his mid-50s and had on sunglasses and was bald. The police unfortunately told me there's nothing they can really do at this point. The best I can do is to stay vigilant and try not to let it freak me out too much. Unfortunately, this has totally ruined my love for going out into the wilderness alone. Nothing bad happened to me, but I think that was more because I was able to escape and lose them than them not having any nefarious intentions. This story is told from the perspective of a man. This incident happened just a few hours earlier, and I'm typing this story currently at my workplace. I work in the garden area of a home improvement store. I don't work the cash registers, and my manager doesn't even let me water the flowers a lot of the time, so really I don't have much to do. This results in me taking extremely long bathroom breaks, where I kinda just scroll on my phone. I know, it sounds bad, but it's better than just standing around trying to look busy, right? And today was the same as any other day, with me wasting time in the bathroom. Nothing of interest happened until my work phone buzzed at the same time as the stall next to mine. This does become important later. A few seconds later, I see that the guy in the next stall over had his hand stretched to the ground, with his palm facing up. At first, I thought he had run out of toilet paper and was asking for mine. He stayed silent for a while though, so I ignored him after that. Then though, he started moving his hand uncomfortably close to my leg, so I immediately scooted away and prepared to leave. Once the man noticed that, he hurriedly exited his stall before I could even move. Another few seconds of silence. I took a peek out from the gap of the stall door to see what the hell this man was doing. Just like a scene from a horror movie, our eyes connected through that tiny slot. He was barely an inch away from my door, trying to peek inside. My blood ran cold. If you're wondering why I didn't immediately shoot open the door and cuss the guy out, well, I really hate confrontation. I avoid it whenever possible and do my best not to draw attention to myself. I stood sideways by the door so he wouldn't be able to see me. That's when the whispering started. I don't know what the first thing he said was, but it sounded like some moaning. The next part was a bit more audible. He said something along the lines of wanting to see more of my unflushed toilet paper. I was thoroughly disgusted. This guy was clearly a complete creep, and I was stuck alone in the bathroom with him. My heart was beating faster by the second. We stayed there like this until another person entered into the bathroom. There was no way I was going to confront this man alone. Probably only a minute later, someone finally arrived, and I took this as my chance to exit and wash my hands and get the hell out of there. Thankfully, the presence of the other person made the old man quit his creepy behavior. As I was about to leave, though, he blocked my path for a second before stepping aside. The weirdest thing, though, was I don't even think that guy works at the store. He wasn't wearing any work vest. My store is extremely lenient about uniform, but most workers at least wear a vest or something connected to the store. He just looked like a random regular customer. I'm certain I heard a work phone's dings echo in that bathroom. The phones have this signature ring to them, so it couldn't have been a coincidence. Either way, he only started creeping on me once the phone ring made it clear I was an employee. The situation really creeped me out, and I've been totally unfocused on my work since then. I kept prowling the garden area to look for any old man wearing a similar outfit to the creeper. I have an incredibly hard time distinguishing faces though, so I probably wouldn't recognize him even if I did see him. I think I should start this off by saying I'm not a great storyteller, so sorry about that in advance. I'm also from the UK. He lived in one country, me in another, which was Britain. I'd never met him until this incident. So I met Tom through this app called Geeking. I won't lie, that place was a breeding ground for pedophiles and just in general awful human beings. Of course, 13-year-old me was using that app daily. I started talking to him about his mental health issues and the classic dynamic of a young girl who just wants to help this older boy who she has a crush on so she becomes his therapist began. What I learned over the years of being his emotional support victim was that Tom was 2 years older than me. He'd had an abusive upbringing apparently with many mental health issues, which he struggled with because of it. Our heavily toxic, verbally abusive relationship was very on and off for over 2 years, until I finally put it to a decisive end in the summer of 2019, after he threatened to R-word me. I blocked him on everything, and moved on with my life. By winter of 2019, I was now working in a cafe, still living in the deep country with my parents, hardly posting on social media, when I suddenly got a message from an unknown Instagram account. I really wish I had screenshotted the first message. It went something like, "Hey, it's Tom. I know we haven't spoken in a while, but I'm going to a concert this weekend in the city nearest to me, and I thought about you." I texted back to be nice, just saying I was doing well, but ended it with that I would rather not stay friends. He said he was comfortable with this, and the conversation pretty much immediately ended. It was 2 days after, and I was working my 5-hour shift in the cafe. I come in through the back door like I always do, and see a pile of what I thought were old clothes at the edge of the window. I didn't think much of it. I did my shift and grabbed my stuff to leave out the door. I walked down the street still feeling completely safe and completely oblivious, until I'm grabbed by my bag suddenly. This 6'2" man who I vaguely recognize is staring down at me. He says my name, and another huge wave of fear kicks in as I immediately recognize this voice. It's Tom. I didn't even give him the time of day to speak. I shook him off and started power walking down the street towards a shop where I knew my dad was. Looking back, I think I maybe should have ran back into my work, but as a 16-year-old who had never been in this sort of terrifying situation before, my first thought was to run straight to my dad. He started following after me, shouting my name. I managed to lose him after sprinting and reach my dad finally. After that, I got a message from the Instagram account saying he was sorry, but he was completely in love with me and needed to have me. It makes me sick to think about. He also mentioned that he thought it was romantic he traveled all this way, him being at the bottom of his country and me being at the top of mine. I blocked that account. Later, he made a new one. I also contacted my work about this. That's where my boss checked the security cameras outside and told me he had been sitting there since 8 a.m. I started work at 10. He had been hiding the entire time in that pile of clothes. I blamed myself for a really long time and shrugged it off as not that big a deal. However, the more he got in contact with me after, the more petrified I felt. I'm now in therapy for it. I've received texts from him with messages that he's changed, he's sorry, that he's a Christian now. The latest one even saying he has a terminal illness and needs to see me one last time. Since changing my number and email though, I've not heard anything from him. I've been told by others that going to the police might make me feel less safe, as they can't do anything now that it's over the internet. I'm back to feeling safe now, which is great, but I hope I never meet Tom again. What is up guys, Blue Spooky here as always. Thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it this far to the end of the video. If you guys enjoyed the content of this video, please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you feel so inclined. If you do decide you like my content enough to subscribe, please be sure to hit the bell button right next to the subscribe button and turn notifications to all so you can be notified of every video I post in the future. If you don't feel like doing that though, I post a video nearly every day, so you can just come back every now and then and check up on what you missed. If you guys have any criticisms on what I can do better or any feedback on the stories in the video, please be sure to leave them in the comments below, as I always enjoy reading all the comments and I try to give them hearts and respond when I can. If you guys would like to reach me for any reason, or you would like to send in a story to be read, you can go ahead and take a look in the description below the video. You'll find a link to all of my social media, including my Facebook, Gmail, and Twitter accounts. Go ahead and send me a message on any of those, and I'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. If you do decide to send in a story, please be sure to include in the tagline what the name of the story is if it has one, what type of story it is if it has a theme, and how you would like to be credited in the description of the video the story appears in. Last but not least, I also run two other channels, Mr. Blue Skies and Darkest Hour, where I do true crime videos and dark documentaries respectively. If that kind of content sounds interesting to you, why not go ahead and check it out and see if it is for you. Aside from that though guys, I think that's pretty much it for now, so thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a great day.